Okay. So, hey, hello, Tom. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Good, good. We had to overcome a bunch of technical issues today, huh?
Yeah, that's because you're dealing with a technological idiot here, Tom, but I'm trying to catch up. Here we
Uh,
are.
don't worry. I think that happens to all of us. So, on my part, I also had a bunch of problems. As you see, today we didn't have the audio or the video for the introduction because I also had problems with technology, Tom. See?
Okay. All right.
So I'm gonna just hold on a second while I share this on Facebook. So here we go.
So they're not
Hmm.
hearing it on Facebook yet.
Yes, they are, Tom. Yes,
Oh,
they are.
okay.
But what I am doing is I'm letting everybody know on my network saying, "Hey, we are live here." So that's what
Okay.
I what we are doing. Okay, so let's try this. So we're starting to have some people come on here. So welcome, Tom, to the second episode on our Magicians Without Borders Conversations. So here we are. So
Here we
let's
are.
try.
I'm glad to be here.
Yes. So what we're gonna do, Tom, today is I want to try and get into like the behind the scenes of everything that happens when we go on a Magicians Without Borders trip. Because when we go on one of those performance trips, that lately we've been calling them like service trips, and that have multiple names. We've been have multiple types of them, and generally, I think that magicians that want to come in one of these trips just say, "Hey, bring me. I'll be there with you. I can do magic." But they maybe don't understand everything that comes before one of those trips, right?
Yeah.
Like there's a lot of planning involved. There's a lot of things that need to happen in order to have the best trip possible. And well, for me, having organized so many of these trips and having multiple people come into those trips, I know all that goes into planning them,
Yeah.
but I cannot imagine the first time that you put on one of these trips. So that's where I want to go today. So on the last episode, we talked about how you got the spark of Magicians Without Borders when you were doing a show on a refugee camp in Kosovo,
Right.
right?
Yep.
And then after that, so take us a little bit towards that time when you came back from Kosovo, right?
Yep.
And the idea of Magicians Without Borders was boiling in your head, right? And
Yep.
then you said, okay, let's try, let's go on a trip. Like take me there. Like what was going through your mind once you came back and you said, okay, let's try and do this again.
Okay. So thank you for setting this up, Carlos. I'm going to try to give you a sense of what that time was like. I came back and I started teaching again psychology at a university, and I was teaching for about 2 or 3 months, and I couldn't get that experience. Those 15 or so shows that I did in Kosovo out of my head. And remember that I had this experience that is kind of amazing to me, that I had been doing magic at that point about 20 years. And I never realized that magic was a universal language, and that no matter where I went in the world, I started to understand that people would experience and understand magic, even though I didn't speak their language. And the even more important thing was that idea from Harry Houdini that magic can not only amaze and amuse, but when you perform for people in difficult situations, it can awaken hope that the impossible is possible. That was really amazing to me that I actually saw that and experienced that in Kosovo. So I came back, I was teaching, and I couldn't get this out of my head. So I went to the head of my psychology department and I said, I want to take a year leave of absence and start an organization that I'm going to call Magicians Without Borders. And so the semester ended and we sent out a letter. This is probably an important thing. I sent out a letter with pictures of that little girl that I told folks about last week, Fatima, who showed me around that first refugee camp. And I sent out a letter with her helping me during one of those shows. And I told people the stories that I told last week about being in those refugee camps and how much it affected me. And people sent me, we basically sent it to friends and family. I can't remember. Maybe we sent out 75 letters or 100 letters. And we got back $20,000. And there was something about the idea of magic and performing for children in very difficult situations, and the idea of hope that just touched people in some very deep way. So we had this money, and
but hold on, you were you expecting that outpour of generosity when you sent those letters out?
I was hoping to get airfare, which was about $1,000.
Okay.
And we got $20,000.
So you got 20 times as much as you expected.
People sent us checks like $500. I was just astonished. And so that's the first backstage thing. You have to have money, a certain amount of money to do this. And I'll just tell you a little side story that I believe that Fatima raised this money. It was her picture.
Okay.
It was the story about her. So Janet and I said 20% of this or 10% of this, $2,000, will go to Fatima. So
interesting.
We ended up going back a year later to that refugee camp and performed again. And we went to the head of the refugee camp and said, we know giving money to people can be a really complicated, dangerous, difficult thing sometimes. But here's the story. And we told the story about Fatima showing us around and being with us and wanting to escape from the camp and all those wonderful things. And we said, we sent out a letter with Fatima's picture in it, and we raised $20,000. And we would like to give her mother $2,000.
Okay, so you were getting the money. You were already finding ways to give it away.
Yeah, and he said $2,000. He said that's more money than is in this entire refugee camp. And there were 2,000 people in the refugee camp. So I said, well, what about giving this money to Fatima's mother? She said, I can't think of a better person, a more responsible person, a person who will do really good things, like send her 6 children to school with that money, to buy them clothes. When we met Fatima, she had a pair of shoes on, like men's shoes. She was only 6 years old, but she had found an old pair of shoes in the garbage dump, and she was wearing those. She said she'll buy them new shoes, she'll buy them clothes, and send them to school. So we ended up giving $2,000 to Fatima's mother. And I just hope and pray that all good things came from that. So anyhow,
so you got the money, you had all these plans of
right.
I mean, those plans were what's the word, sparked by the outpour of generosity that you felt. Am I right?
Well, the plans to do it was inspired by my experience in Kosovo, but then people sent us all this money, and we thought, okay, where will we go? And we read about refugee situations in the world because that's where we wanted to go. And it turned out that Ethiopia had they were hosting the most refugees of any other country in the world. And that was
how did you find that out? How did you find that out? And tell me why, but how did you find that out?
We went on to the UN High Commission for Refugees website, and we researched various countries and where there were the most refugees. And we found out at that time, in 2003, this was January, the very, very beginning of the year, we found out it was Ethiopia. And it was because their western border is 2,000 miles long. It borders Sudan. And there had been a 20-year war going on in Sudan at that time. And there were 6 major refugee camps along that border with 35,000 people in each one of those camps. So there was already like a couple 100,000 people there. And at the north was Eritrea, and there had been a war for years between Ethiopia and Eritrea. And the northern border was filled with refugee camps. And the the eastern border was with Somalia, and there was just chaos. It was called, what was it? It had no government. I mean, life was just chaotic in Somalia at that time, and people were fleeing into Ethiopia. So there were many, many, many refugee camps along that border also. So the country was almost completely surrounded by war and refugee camps. So I wrote to Geneva, Switzerland, to the headquarters of the UN High Commission for Refugees. Or no, I'm sorry. I did. I went on the UN High Commission for Refugees website and found out who sat on what was called the East Africa desk of the UN High Commission for Refugees. And it was a woman named Delphine Marie. She was a French speaking Swiss woman. She was French Swiss. And so I wrote to her and told her that we had this organization called Magicians Without Borders, and we wanted to do work in the refugee camps.
So you send her an email hoping that she would just reply and say, hey, yes, I love it. Let's set something up. Get over here.
Go do magic for refugees. She never responded. So
she never responded?
She never responded. So then I get a letter. One of the shows that I did in Kosovo was a tiny show at a little school up in the mountains. It was a very isolated village, and there were a lot of refugees there. And so I did my show, and after the show, this woman came up to me, and she had cameras, 2 or 3 cameras hanging around her neck and a gadget bag hanging there with accessories. And she said, My name's Helena Ko, and I'm the official photographer for the United Nations in the Balkans. And I took pictures of you during your magic show. And I'm publishing a book, or the UN is publishing a book on peace coming to Kosovo. And I think what you did is part of the bringing of peace to Kosovo. And I thought, oh, that's, and she said, what is your name? So she wrote down my name, and I was from Vermont. So I completely forgot about that. I went on, did my shows. I mean, literally that was a 2-minute interaction. And she left. And I packed up my magic, got in my
she just wanted to know who
UN car and went off.
She just wanted to know who
she just wanted
took the picture of, right?
Yeah, she wanted to be able to put that underneath the picture if this ever got published. So, and she was sort of asking me, I guess she probably asked me for my permission to publish it. If and I think I must have said yes, I guess. I don't remember. But now I think she probably asked me that also. So I'm writing this woman, Delphine Marie, in Switzerland, this French woman, and getting no answer. I get a book in the mail called
let me see that book.
Journey Home. And it's the humanitarian challenge in Kosovo. And in here are pictures of me doing a magic show.
Awesome.
For those magicians out there, I'm doing the zombie, as you can see.
Yeah. So for people that are not seeing this on video or hearing this later on the podcast, Tom is holding up a beautiful, beautiful book of pictures taken by this photographer of the war or of the refugees in Kosovo. And right now there's 4 pictures, beautiful pictures of Tom doing the zombie ball for one of the kids. Go ahead, Tom.
And so that was amazing. And along with the book, she said, I'm now in New York. And I'm settling in New York. I've been in Kosovo. She had been a photographer in a war zone for 5 years. And she said, I'm just kind of settling into New York. So I wrote to her and I thanked her for the book. And I said, you know, we have a very beautiful place out in the country, in the mountains of Vermont. Why don't you come up here and just spend a week? You don't have to do anything. You've been in this amazingly difficult, tragic, terrible place for 5 years, photographing it. Come up here and take a rest. And she said, I would love it. So she came up to Vermont. And so I'm sitting here like the second day she's here, and I'm typing my 10th letter to Delphine Marie in Switzerland saying, please, we'd like to do some good for refugees. So we had lunch and I said, you know, I'm trying to get a hold of this woman in Switzerland who's on the East Africa desk of the UN High Commission for Refugees. She said, what's her name? I said, her name is Delphine Marie. She said, she's my best friend.
What are the chances?
So she sat down at my computer and typed a letter to Delphine in French. And within, I don't know, 20 minutes, we got a response. And
so you spend a bunch of times, 10 letters, writing to this person saying, hey, we do this, we want to be there, and no response. But then this photographer that just wanted to rest in your house.
I met for 2 minutes. I met her for 2 minutes in Kosovo, in a tiny little village a year earlier. Who would
Yeah,
have imagined?
and you had the most I don't know how to say this, like the small interaction with nothing profound exchanged, just your name, and then
Yeah.
a year later, that connection of her saying that she's one of my best friends, and writing that email that got you in touch, that was probably, I mean,
Yeah.
a very
And
big step for Magicians Without Borders.
it was an amazing step. And Janet and I refer to these moments as angel moments. Like there's some angel has been following us around from the very beginning and making connections, unbelievable, magical, impossible connections like this one. I said, I'm trying to get a hold of this woman in Switzerland. And she said, what's her name? And I said, Delphine Marie. And she says, that's my best friend. That's how crazy is that? That's amazing.
Yes.
So anyhow,
That's
anyhow,
like a magic trick, like that's not possible. There's no way that
I
happened.
know it's amazing. So Delphine Marie said, and as a matter of fact, I have a really wonderful friend who works for the UN in Addis Ababa, the capital of Ethiopia. His name is Mahari Maasho, and he's the what they call the public information officer. He's the one who dealt with visitors and did press releases and all that kind of stuff for the UN in Ethiopia. So she said, write to Mahari and tell him that Delphine Marie said to write to him, and he'll help you out. So we wrote to him, and he was just thrilled that we wanted to come to Ethiopia. So he said, if you come, we will, I'll set up all the shows in all the refugee camps. Because one of the things for folks who may not know this is there's a belief out there, especially like in the United States right now, sadly, that refugees are a threat. Like immigrants are a threat. Like the folks coming from Honduras and Guatemala and El Salvador and Mexico are a threat. But what the UN High Commission for Refugees, they have a poster, one of the first ones I saw, refugees are not a threat, they are threatened. They're the victims, and they're just trying to escape violence and terrible, difficult situations. And so when the UN creates refugee camps, they have tremendous security in those refugee camps. It's very, very difficult to get into a refugee camp. So we needed Mahari Maasho, and we needed Delphine, and we needed Helena Ko to get us into those refugee camps that are very, very secure, because people would break into those camps and kill people, and it was awful. So anyhow, we flew to Ethiopia, and Mahari met us at the airport, and we were there for about a month, and he got us on a plane. He went with us to we flew like 1,000 miles across Ethiopia to the Sudan border, and we landed in a small city called Gambela, and there's an immense refugee camp there. And we went there, and then we went to all those refugee camps along the border. And sometimes it would take us. Pardon me?
Sometimes it would take you what?
Sometimes we would leave the hotel. Mahari would pick us up, and there was usually a driver, and we might have to drive 10 hours on a road that the UN built to get to the refugee camp. So, I mean, they're out in, like, they're small cities, 30, 40,000 people. They have to be near a river, so they have a water source. So anyhow.
Okay, so those places were very far away, very, very, marginalized physically.
Yeah.
But I want to still take you a little bit before all those, like before the trip. Like you already said, you set it up. You needed the person in the ground over there in Ethiopia to organize everything, the logistics there. Right. But I want to get a little bit more behind the scenes of you saying, okay, so after Helena got you the contact, and then this person in Geneva said, okay, let's set this up. She connected you to the guy in Ethiopia, and then you bought the tickets. You knew where you were gonna stay. But what was your mindset going into it? Like, do you know, or better yet, what were your biggest fears going into it? Like, do you have any like, oh, maybe this we're missing this, or this might not go as planned? Or you were just super excited and saying, this is going to be the best experience?
I don't remember being afraid. I think Janet, my wife, and I were just very excited about going, and because I think we were, even though I had been in those camps in Kosovo, honestly, they were nothing like the camps in Ethiopia. The camps in Ethiopia were really immense. They were sprawling, like I said, 30, 40,000 people. We went to our I don't want to jump ahead. I'm just trying to answer your question. I think.
Like, what were you feeling right before the trip? Like, yes, excitement, but anything else? Like, anything else was going through your mind? Like, what was going?
I'm sure there must have been parts of me that were feeling, anxious that because this was our very first real official trip. Mm-hmm. The one in Kosovo was, that was where we were inspired to do this. But we were going, the UN was taking care of us. They were going to take us. They didn't pay for the trip or anything, but they flew us on a World Food Program airplane to the Ethiopia-Sudan border. We stayed in the refugee camps. So they put us up in their compound. So this felt a little more official or something,
okay.
Good. And we had to do a good job, and we didn't really know whether this magic stuff, how it was going to work, Mm-hmm. So we were told, we were being taken to our very first show. And I think we were told there were going to be 200 people there at the show. 200.
That's a big crowd. That's a big crowd.
Well, it turned out there were 1,200 people there.
That's an insane amount of people.
We drove in, and I looked, and I thought there were seats, like in a sports place. There were like bleachers, what we call in English bleachers, right? But they weren't. They had arranged themselves according to height. And they were all standing there. And there were Dinka, people from the Dinka tribe, who were like 6'6", 6'10", and they were all standing in the back, and then smaller and smaller people. And they had been waiting maybe 2 hours.
Wow.
And they were all ready. And I felt badly. And I said to Mahari, I said, these folks have been waiting for so long. He said to me something that I'll never forget. He said, one thing refugees know how to do is wait. It was amazing. Because some of those refugees had been in that camp for like 20 years.
A lot of waiting.
So anyhow, I'm setting up my table. Janet, would you come here just for a second? I just want to introduce Janet here.
Hi for you. For those of us those of you who are listening to this later in the podcast, Janet Fredericks has just joined the video call. She's also the founder of Magicians Without Borders and Tom's wife. Hey, Janet, how are you?
Hey, I'm fine, thank you. How are you?
She was just
How's everybody tonight?
Good.
So
she
nice
was
to
just
see you.
walking by here, going into her art studio, but she's very much part of this next part of the story. So I have my back to the crowd, and I'm setting up my props on the table, and all of a sudden, there's this laughter that starts. And I turn around, and Janet, dressed in her mime costume, just waded right into this crowd of over 1,000 people, 1,200 people, and just started. And I felt immediately okay. They just started laughing at whatever she was doing with them. And then I got set up and started the first show. And
Great.
something I realized again for the first time, like it was amazing. When I took a scarf and I put it into my hand and opened my hand and it disappeared, people just went crazy. They just like, this was magic, So anyhow, that was the very first. And then we went on and probably did shows for 200,000 people, those over the next 4 weeks.
A lot of people. And what were you feeling, or how did you approach all those different shows? Like after that first show where you just ride in and there's more than 1,000 people, and you must have been like, whoa, how am I gonna do? Because you don't travel for people that maybe have not seen you perform. You don't do big illusions, right? You don't.
No, I don't. I do really. What I do is what magicians would call platform magic or parlor magic. I do magic that most people do for 200 or 300 people, at the most, if you're on a little bit of a rise, and people can see you. But I've learned, and one of the great things of performing for people who do not speak your language, my magic show is very verbal. I talk a lot during my show, and I tell stories, and I do.
Yeah, your stories are wonderful.
things.
Yes.
But I can't do that when I'm in a refugee camp. I have to really, as they say, I have to show, I can't say. So everything has to be big and visible and dramatic and nonverbal. So performing for these almost 20 years, I think has my show. I just did a show last night in a resort over in the Adirondack Mountains of New York. And my show is still very verbal. But I think I learned a lot about my body and about acting and about theater performing for people who don't speak my language. So it's been a really wonderful gift, something that
Awesome.
happened that very first trip. When we came to Addis Ababa, I just remembered this. We stayed in a Swedish Lutheran religious guest house. And I can't even remember how we ended up there. Maybe Mahari knew somebody and he put us up there. And we came down to breakfast the next morning. And I had walked up the stairs to go to our room, and I was exhausted. And you might understand this, Carlos, from having visitors come to Bogota. I think Addis Ababa is 8,000 feet above sea level.
Yes.
And Bogota is what, like 5,000 feet or something like that?
Let me just convert that real quick.
Meters? How many meters?
2,600. So it's like 8,500. Yeah.
8,500 feet?
Yes.
Right. So I was exhausted the next morning, and I didn't realize, but it was like I wasn't getting as much oxygen as usual and all of that. But we ran into a doctor from, let me see. I think he may have been from Sweden also, who was staying in this guest house. And we joined him for breakfast downstairs. And we told him what we were doing. We were going to go to the refugee camps and perform magic for the refugees. He got so angry at us. And he said, those people don't need magic. Those people need food and shelter and clothing. They don't need magic. They need, and he was a doctor, and he was going there and he was going to give them what they really needed. And I went, oh my God, what are we doing? And I really began to doubt myself, like, what are we? So I just want to tell a story in response to that, because I didn't have, if I had this story at that moment with that doctor, and we hadn't done our first show yet. This was the first morning we were in Ethiopia. And we're told you're wasting your time. This is wrong, what you're doing. It was.
Yeah, this is not needed. This is not something that's essential.
This is not essential. This is not needed. So years later, about 8 years ago, so we had been doing Magicians Without Borders for 10 or 12 years. We ended up in Iran, and we did shows on both borders, also there for Iraqi refugees who were in Iran from the Iran-Iraq war. And then we went over to the eastern border of Iran that borders Afghanistan. And there were all refugees from, the Russian invasion of Afghanistan and then the American invasion of Afghanistan. So we came into an Afghan refugee camp and were met by this wonderful Afghan man with a beautiful turban and a long white beard, and he greeted us. He spoke very good English, and we sat down and had a cup of tea and talked a little bit. And then he said, where would you like to perform?
Mhm.
And we said, well, we'd like to perform in an inside space if we could, but we can perform outside if we have to, but inside is usually better for focus and all of that. So he got this kind of look on his face. He said, our only inside space is the mosque.
Oh.
And then he paused and he said, we would be honored to have you perform for the children in the mosque. So we went into the mosque and set up, and they brought in 500 girls, and we did a show for them. And then after that, they brought in 500 boys, and we did a show for the boys. And we were, afterwards, we got together with that Afghan elder again and had another cup of tea. And he said, I've been in this refugee camp for 17 years, since the Russian invasion of Afghanistan. And you are the first entertainers to ever come to this camp.
In 17 years.
17 years. He said, the international NGOs, like the International Rescue Committee and the International Red Cross and the UN, he said, they take very good care of us. They give us shelter, security, food, clothing, everything. He said, and this is exactly what he said. He said, I don't mean any blame by this, but I think sometimes they think we're only bodies. He said, but today you fed the minds and the imaginations of those children, and they'll be talking and thinking about what they saw today for many, many months. And thank you. God bless you. Please come back again.
That's so wonderful to hear, Tom, because that encounter that you had with the doctor, I think most of us that do or that have done this kind of work in places where it's normally not accessible, get that kind of backlash, a response from other people, and we have that self-doubt. And I think one way of thinking about it, it's that it's very hard to put into numbers or quantify the impact that we have, right? Yeah. We don't have a way of saying, hey, well, I heard 3,500 laughs, or you can't say that, or that kid's imagination grew by 3%.
Right.
It's super hard to quantify the impact of entertainment.
The magic show provided 800 calories for each of those children.
And because they laugh, they are now a little bit more healthier, because laughter. It's super hard to pin down the real impact of entertainment and of something that inspires the mind, as you just said. Like they're living in impossible situations, like you said before, and it's like, they're not only bodies, they need to feel different things. They need to see different things. And I think this is a big lesson. Like, with whatever kind of thing you do, you have to figure out or find out inside you the why you're essential, right? And maybe that would come, I don't know, by doing it 100 times, because that show was not the first you did, right? That show where they did in the mosque came after.
No, that was many years later.
So it took you a bunch of years, but and it might take some people more or less, but to find that you're essential, I think that's very, very hard to do, but you have to feel it inside. I mean, I'm pretty sure that when you went and did those shows, Tom, or you were about to do the first show, you were pretty sure that was going to leave a lasting impact.
Yeah.
On those refugees, but not everybody can see it, and I think that's a struggle that we've felt, or that I've personally felt, at least. For example, right now we're in 2020 during this quarantine, and entertainment in places that need entertaining, right, has been, at least the list of the priorities, right?
Yeah.
Because first is, shelter, food, and all these things, but entertainment.
Yeah.
It's like, hey, that's just not even in the priorities,
Yeah.
Like there was even a publication that I cannot remember right now where it was from, but that it listed the least essential jobs, and entertainment was on the least, one of the least graded or whatever jobs, because it's, unfortunately, we don't feel it as necessary. But I think us being performers, we have such a high reputation for it. We know the impact of it, so we need to feed off of that. Because that's
what you said. I think that often when schools have to cut back their budget, it's the music programs, it's the the theater programs, it's the art programs. They're the ones that go first. Reading, writing, and arithmetic are really important. But I don't think we realize sometimes how much, as that Afghan elder said, those kind of activities make us human, and they feed our minds and our hearts and our imaginations. Something else that happened on that first trip to Ethiopia that's in this same category, very subtle, what we did. I never would have realized what we had done if one of the refugees hadn't said it to me. So we did some shows in the camp, and we did one show. There were thousands of people. They were up in trees and they were everywhere, so they could see the show. And that night, and it was really a good show. It went really well. And so we're sitting in the UN compound inside the refugee camp, and we're eating. And I'm there with one of the elders from the refugee population who was sort of working for the United Nations. And he was at that show.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, it was amazing, that show. And I thought he was referring to the magic, like, whoa, great magic.
Mm-hmm.
He said, we laugh together in our tukels, in our huts. They're called tukels. He said, we laugh with our family and friends in small groups. He said, but I've been in this camp now for 20 years. He said, for 20 years. And he said, today was the first time we laughed together as a community. He said there were a couple thousand people, and from different tribes, different parts of Sudan. They were all different, but they were all laughing together. He said that was an amazing moment, that we all laughed. And that's how he said it. We laughed together as a community. And the magic created a community. I never would have realized that, what a big thing we did,
and how something like it's an expected reaction from an audience, like a laughter or amazement or awe, that you expect to get when you perform magic, right?
Yeah.
Can have that big of an impact, saying that was the first time in 20 years that we laughed together as a community.
Yeah. I mean, there
It's
were,
very, very powerful.
and some of the people, like the Dinkas and the Arawak, are enemies back in Sudan, and they end up in the same refugee camp, and there they are at a magic show, and they're all laughing together. The magic sort of brought them together in spite of their tribal differences.
Yeah, it's like a unifier. It's I love those stories, Tom.
I don't know if this helps the behind the scenes, but I would like to do a moment of fundraising here.
Go ahead.
People say I can only give $10. I say, well, a hotel in Ethiopia costs $11. So if you give $10, you'll pay for a night in an Ethiopian hotel for us, and that'll be wonderful. So this work is terrific, and we're really missing the traveling right now, but we're doing some virtual things. But if you can make a donation, it would be really, really wonderful. And after our last conversation, I think some people made a donation. So you don't have to. You could maybe you want to donate some magic props for our students, or I don't know, write to us and tell us how you'd like to support us.
Awesome, Tom. Yes, I'll second that fundraising moment, saying yes. I mean, we appreciate all the help we can get, and as you said, sometimes people say, no, when I have enough money so that I can sponsor the whole trip, I'll donate, right? And that's not. I mean, that's not what we're looking for, and that's not the help we need. We need small amounts donated every month, and that's how these programs can remain independent. We can do what we think it's best because we've seen it, and our work can continue. And if anybody that's listening can contribute from whatever amount you can contribute a month, that's just that really is what keeps the motor going in this magical transformative power, moving.
And if there's magicians listening, which I hope there are, realize that your magic has a tremendous power, and someone who started the program in Colombia, and the best thing he did was brought us Carlos López. This fella, Ryan Bart, as an undergraduate at Gonzaga University, every Saturday he went to Sacred Heart Hospital in Spokane, Washington, and performed magic for the children and nurses and doctors. And realize that you have a very powerful tool in your magic, and you can take it to hospitals. You could go to a drug rehab center and do a magic show for the folks in there who are struggling, trying to recover from addiction. Or you can go to a senior center where they're having lunch and a bunch of older people and do magic for them. They're a wonderful audience. And you're not going to get paid. Maybe you will get paid, but most of the time in those places, you're not going to get paid in money, but you're going to be paid in meaning and feeling like your magic has really brought you, brought some meaning and made the world a little happier, better place. So that's the way of donating.
We're having some trouble with Tom. Maybe his battery died out.
Oh, did it?
But no, there you are. you're back.
Oh, I'm not sure what happened. Okay.
Yeah, a little glitch on the matrix. But yes, what you were saying, you're not going to get paid in dollars. You're going to get paid in meaning, and I think that's wonderful.
Yeah.
And I just wanted to say something that, or remind people something that Megan just said on the chat. She said that another way to support us is not only through our donations, but if you shop at Amazon.com, you can start doing it by shopping in smile.amazon.com, right? And choose to support magicians without. I'm typing this out as I say it, without borders. So Amazon has this program that's called Smile.Amazon, and what they do is they donate an amount for every purchase that's on that site. And when you do, it's the same site as Amazon.com, but you put a smile for Amazon.com, and when you do it, when you chop over there through that URL, you have to select a charity or a nonprofit to support while you chop. So you can select Magicians Without Borders. So every purchase that you make on Amazon, if you do it through smile.amazon.com, we will get some of Amazon's help. So and right now, most of us get most of our things through Amazon.com. So that's a huge support opportunity. So thank you, Megan, for reminding us of that.
Thank you, Megan. That's great.
Yes.
And if you do it once, it's really easy to do it the second time. It only adds a few seconds to your purchase.
In the first time. So Tom, thank you for this talk, for this episode of Magicians Without Borders conversation. It was super enlightening to hear all the behind the scenes and those serendipitous stories that made that first trip a reality. And all that you've learned through the years. It's inspiring as always. And thank you to all the people that were here on the live session. We're going to post this up later on our YouTube channel and on our podcasts. So once again, thank you everybody for being here. If you guys want to hear some particular stories, or you guys want to know some or have some questions for us, please do write to us on the comments or sending us a message through Facebook. We'll do our best to address them on our next conversations. And it's been a blast, Tom. Any last words?
No, I'm just happy for this opportunity to hopefully not only let you know about Magicians Without Borders and what we've been doing, but hopefully inspire you to what you can do with your life and your magic, because magic has been a tremendous gift in my life. And one of the greatest gifts about it is being able to share it with other people, especially people, in hospitals or refugee camps, or it just is an amazing thing. So thank you, Carlos, and good night, everybody out there. And stay safe and sane in these COVID pandemic times. Okay. Good night. Good night. Good night.
Thank you, Tom, and bye-bye, everybody. See you next week.
Okay. Bye-bye.